Welcome to the Treachery of Data podcast, the companion podcast for the CRO Roundtable, a bite-sized chunk of content summarizing a recent roundtable discussion topic. All right, so this week we are going to get into client-side versus server-side testing. What are the pros and cons of each, some of the tools that are on the table, and we also have a special guest here, which this seems to be possibly becoming more and more of a thing. Ollie
See?
Patton, how you doing?
Hey guys, how's it
Hello.
going?
You want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. I'm Ollie Payton. I've been working in experimentation for around 20 years, getting there. Started off with the likes of hotels.com, and I've consulted over lots of different companies and lots of different agencies over the last 20 years. I think last time I counted, it was over 4,500 experiments that I've run. Some of them good, some of them bad, and some of them ugly. All of them with learnings of some sort or another.
Yeah. That would be that's a new way to classify test results. They're either good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah, good, bad, or ugly.
So I guess the target audience for today's episode is going to be both technical people and decision makers around anybody involved in selecting and using the tool stack in the experimentation program. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So let's get into it. All right. So first let's start off with like a description of like, okay, what is client side testing versus what is server side testing?
Cool.
Okay, who wants to go there?
Who's gonna go? Go for it, Big Bo.
All right. So
Description chicken.
description chicken. So client-side testing is where the A/B testing tool is a third-party JavaScript plugin. It plugs into your website, and then after the page has been delivered, after the page has been rendered for the user, then the third-party script kicks in and then alters the experience for a certain number of people.
One thing here though,
Yeah.
neither of these necessarily are first party versus third party tools. You could very easily be working in-house with a client side based.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true.
The experiments run or executed in the browser on the client's machine, on like the client or user's machine. Client side versus server. Client means like the end user's machine based.
And that's a much better definition. And then server side is where the server actually decides what is going to get served to the user in terms of an A/B experiment.
Depending on the tool, there's different degrees of like what's handled where and when and stuff. But the long and short of it is like, where are the code changes for the variation taking place? Are they taking place on the server and then delivered to the user? Or is the page delivered to the user first and then the code changes happen to create the variation?
And then there's the
core like difference between the two.
And then there's a very niche one, which is changing the page as it's being delivered to the user, like as a proxy service.
Yeah, like an intermediary service. Yeah, those are still considered, I guess, server side.
Yeah.
Because the change happens before it gets delivered to the client. But that's more of like a technical configuration of like, is it actually happening on the server or is it happening like via an intermediary?
Yeah. And even on the server side of things, there's still like there's an SDK that lives in your app. And then there's also like a third-party service that you can call server to server that will do your assignments as well, like Adobe Target server side would kind of work on that third-party server somewhere else that gives you your assignments. So yeah, there are nuances definitely on the technical delivery.
Let's talk about how much experience each of us has with the two different methods. So for me, I've only ever had experience with client-side testing. I understand server-side testing from a theoretical standpoint, but I don't have any actual practical experience in using a server-side tool.
I've got experience with both client-side testing and also server-side, including the proxy service thingy, which is SiteSpect, that I've got experience with. But then, for some clients also experience with delivering tests from the server.
I've got both. I've worked again with SiteSpect in my first role in experimentation. And in that place, we also had our own in-house server-side tool. So SiteSpec can run client and server side experiments. So yeah, we're kind of using all three delivery methods there. Obviously worked with Iqbal in one of our more recent employments, again, working with SiteSpec. And then most recently with Sky, working with Optimizely, which was both client and server side. So quite a varied amount of both.
All right. Now, what are the so someone's coming in starting a new testing program. They don't have anything, so they're trying to evaluate tools and systems and like which way to go.
Mhm.
What kind of are like the pros and cons of each method? And I know like that's like a simple question to ask, and a lot of times it's vice versa. Like, oh, this one's a pro for this reason, which is a con for the other one, and then whatnot. But that's probably a good way to get the conversation started of like articulating the like useful differences between the two.
Cool. Do you want to take client side and I'll take server side, Iqbal?
Yeah. Give me the short end of the stick.
Oh, this is fun. I
There's
just
no, there's no short end.
I,
There's no
I'm
short end.
kidding. We're going to be talking objectively, so we're not picking one side over another, but just kind of looking at both of those on the same level. So yeah, it's quick to get started with a client side testing tool. All you need is just somebody to insert the script, and then you can use the tool to build your tests, and it's agnostic of independent of the code releases and what the developers may be doing on the server. That makes it also easy for agencies and consultants and outside parties, people not necessarily embedded into the development team, to be running tests.
Low
The
effort cost of getting a system up and running.
And also you get all of a lot of the niceties, dashboards and stuff like that. Obviously, some of the server side solutions do provide that as well.
Well, are there any other pros? Like one of the big benefits of client side for me, there's small startup costs, but like the tool is also a lot more self-sufficient in that like
Yeah.
once the script is installed on the site, you're building the tests and setting up goals. You're doing most of the work within the test tool itself. So there's not like you don't have to rely on like your engineering team to do deployments and like code releases and schedule timing and do rollbacks and things like that. Right. You're like, because it's just the JavaScript, you can deliver that JavaScript and alter it
Yeah.
fairly quickly, painlessly.
So for strengths of server side, I think there are a few. So I think there are benefits in having your core developers building experiments.
Why
Everything
would
will
that
be,
be advantageous? Oh, like, because we just talked about like, hey, it's
yeah.
easy to not like involve the engineer. Like, why would it be beneficial to
Yeah.
do that?
So mainly because over their awareness, they know what's going on, right? So it's good for them to know what experiments is going on. Again, you could probably deal with that with comms, but it goes through their QA path. And then one of the final ones on that is when you finalize the experiment, you don't have a load of rework. You don't have to rebuild it. It's already there. You already build the feature. It's a build once functionality. So assuming it wins, or in some cases, if it's black, you'll just switch it over and that's the work done. So there's no
So by
tech.
so bu- okay, so to clarify, by build once, you mean like since this was like inherently engineered as part of the test build, if the
Yeah,
result is successful, the implementation was taken care of as part of the test build process rather than like, and right, this kind of gets into one of the cons of client side testing is how you build the variations is not how something gets implemented on the site
exactly. Yeah. So
typically, right? Because
this
you're
was
you're using JavaScript manipulations, you're not actually like altering the correct
exactly that.
structure.
That was the next one I was going to say is, you know, if you're trying to build your experiment feature as real as it could or can be in the future, something that you're going to live with, then yeah, you're testing something that is real. Whereas the execution method in JavaScript on the client side might be slightly different. And having,
Mhm.
worked in places where we have both, we've ended up testing on client side and then releasing it via another A/B test on the server side. And in the handful of occasions where we've done that, we've seen different results. Now, that could be the execution and visuals of the feature was slightly different. Could also be the performance of the JavaScript was maybe altering or giving you a slightly duff read on the reality of the situation. Could have also been that we've changed.
Scheduling could be an
Yeah,
issue. Like, there's a whole bunch of yeah.
yeah, yeah. But essentially, it should be more real. And then final thing, which I think is a cultural thing, is that in a way, by having an agency and a CRO designer and a load of CRO experts on top of what you probably have in house as CRO, some designers, some developers, etc. You're kind of saying that well, these guys and CRO is a separate thing, whereas merging into one bigger team is kind of it's growing CRO culture in a way. You're dispersing the ability to deliver experiments to lots of developers and making some assumptions there that you have lots of developers that could do CRO, whereas in the other scenario, you might have two or three developers building CRO tests. You're enabling any developer within your whole organization to deliver an experiment. You're kind of growing that capability and the culture of experimentation in a way that allows everyone to be part of it, as opposed to creating a silo for experimentation and making it out to be something completely separate to the mainstream of development. And I think that's a cultural benefit to CRO become and experimentation becoming ingrained within the way that a company does things.
If everybody has to be involved in the process, then inherently it becomes part of the culture.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Feels like when you say it
Which
like
is just
forcing it. Yeah,
yeah, right. Well, that it's just a matter of perspective, right? One
yeah,
person forcing it is another person's like integrating it and raising
yeah,
awareness.
yeah,
Right. Now, that also gets into like pro con trade off with on the client side. So like, oh, sure, maybe that's harder because client side's easier to adopt. So maybe that
mm,
makes it a little bit more siloed. But there's also a trade off there to your point. You're saying like, oh, you're assuming there's lots of developers on
yes,
staff in house, right? Like that's definitely not the case for lots of
true.
companies, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so server side testing is much harder for them. So client side provides a path for them to be able to execute.
definitely. There is one last thing I think is another benefit is that if there are back end changes needed in your experiment, like a different API or a new piece of data, you kind of need to use server side experimentation. There are always hacks that you can do client side, um, you know, reloading pages, making API calls from the front end, all sorts of things that can be done. That if you told some proper
You can
developers,
take a
what kind of
client side test pretty far, but
yeah, you can.
yeah,
But is it
yeah,
always the
and
best thing?
yeah, like, and that when I'm talking with like a client or whatever, and we're talking test ideas and like what are the actual restrictions. That's usually how I explain sort of the line in the sand of like capabilities of like if we're using a client side tool and we want to test something that's dealing with dynamic data that does not currently exist on the page, that is something that you cannot do through client side testing.
The other things are no flicker. So with the client side, you'll
Very
sometimes
good
see a
point.
flash of original content, and then also the performance. There could be a performance impact of the client side tools.
So let's get into those a little bit because those are
Yeah,
more like actual technical differences
yeah.
between the two. So explain what Flickr is.
So this is where, as when we described the client side tools and how the client side A/B testing tools work, in that they deliver the page is delivered, the page is rendered for the user, and then the tool kicks in as a JavaScript add-on sort of thing. So what that means for the user is that they would see potentially the original content before the new variation quickly comes in and goes, you're not supposed to see this. This is what you're supposed to see. So boom, 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 the page changes. So that's what we call the flicker or the flash of
The
original
user can
content.
see the variation, like
Yeah, like
causing the
Yeah.
changes to happen to the
yeah, and that kind of
yeah,
draws the attention to the change in question, and that could influence the direction of the result. So
right.
it could
Because
make
yeah,
it either a loss
animation
or a
and
win.
movement are generally like a big catchy eye focus thing,
Yes.
right? That's it. Like if
Yeah.
you want to draw someone's attention, that's a really good way to get them to look at a thing on a page, regardless.
Yeah.
So a technical side effect of how client side systems work is that they potentially cause this like
Yeah.
motion or animation effect to
And
happen
Yeah.
going
as a
back to what
byproduct.
Ollie was saying before, that's not the implementation that users would see when if it were to be rolled out as a feature for all users. You wouldn't, if you were always going to see that Flash original content is no problem, but that's not what will ultimately get rolled out if the test is a win.
Uh, I think there are some ways around it. Normally they're pretty nasty, so you might pause the page
Yeah, there's
slightly,
some tricks
and
you
then
can do, but
yeah, and I'd say probably say making the same point about server side. Yeah, you should be able to load all the content with the right HTML down to the client, so it appears immediately, no flicker. The one challenge to that I've seen quite frequently is caching. And if you cache an HTML page, then you might not even get that request going back to the server. So there may be some modifications you need to make in terms of the way that you cache your website, the way you cache your HTML, the way you make certain API requests. So it's not always completely straightforward to deploy a server-side testing tool, and there are some considerations around caching, use of Akamai or Cloudflare in front of your website.
yeah. Now those performance issues, those are more related to like load speed and things like that as well. Like, cause is there a trade-off there between client side and server side? I mean, certainly for client side, because you're delivering extra JavaScript to execute the test. So
Yep.
there's a file size increase. Now you can manage that somewhat through the testing tool. Like normally, well, at least based on my experience with tools that I've used, and this is generally uniform across like 4 or 5 different tools, so I'm assuming it's common, is that, right, you're building the tests in the platform, and what that's really doing is, like, that all of the configurations that you're making compile into the JavaScript file that gets delivered to the
Yeah.
site. And
Yeah.
there's ways to say, like, archive things or turn things off so that, like, they're not contributing code. Like, if you have a test that you finished running, you can archive it, and then that test code is not being, like, compiled into the JavaScript payload anymore. Because, like, and so you have to, like, manage your test list to make sure that you're keeping your JavaScript file
Yeah.
trim and
Snippet.
lean.
Yeah.
There's also an issue there of, like, maturity of, like, hey, if you're wanting to run 20 tests a month, 30, like if you're wanting to significantly increase your velocity, that's going to significantly increase your payload size as well.
And if you can't deal with that tech debt, if you've got 100 tests that you've finished, you put them to 100% because you want to take the benefit, but your
That's a
technical
good point
team
as well.
aren't able to deal with that tech debt and finalize them for you, then you might end up in a situation where you've got all these things running, and Google will penalize you for your cumulative layout shift, which is what your features and visuals changing within the page from JavaScript. That will contribute to cumulative layout shift, and you will potentially get penalized by Google, and they'll de-rank you completely, but you may be penalized in terms of rankings as well.
To take the performance issue first, there is this misconception that server side is absolutely free of any performance impact
Mhm.
running tests server
Yes.
side, and that's not necessarily the case. What you're doing is shifting the performance impact to the server. So there'll be a sideways call being made to the testing tool to get the assignments
Yeah.
and whatever it is they need to get. Now that should be pretty quick. So yeah, that should be pretty like a very quick hop, but it should be noted that there is potentially an impact there, and depending on the tool, there could be a variable amount of impacts. That's something you'll need to measure.
Yeah.
The other thing, the tech debt issue, and we got this in the con for the server side. So one of the things you mentioned, Ollie, is that when you build the test, then when you're ready to roll out on the server side, I mean, you build the test on the server side, and you're ready to roll out the test as a win. You all you do is you switch off the original, and then you direct
Mm.
traffic to the variation. That is a case for a lot of the time, but some of the times it's not, because when you're building a test, you usually would have to cut some corners. Like if you were to build something with an API call and gets this and another API call, blah, blah, blah. Or you could use some stub data and then
Mm.
minimize the um, duration of the test. So then, and the traffic for the test. So then it's all only active for the relevant data that you got the stub data for. Um, then it's when it comes to rolling out that test to 100% traffic, there would need to be some development done. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a little bit of it's not always that clear cut.
Yeah. 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 It
I guess.
depends. Don't cut corners though, Iqbal. That's the way.
Hey,
Never cut any
20% win
corners.
rate. We have to cut corners.
Well, yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
another big factor, right? Is win rate. Yeah, if you're that benefit is only really relevant if you've got a high win rate. If
yeah,
you've got a low win rate, then you're still getting your core developers to build stuff that you're going to end up canning. It's still wasting like expensive time, I
yeah.
guess.
And also the dev time on the server side could be much more expensive, because if, for instance, they're building tests and unit tests and stuff like that around new features,
Mm,
existing unit tests need to facilitate for the A/B test
mm.
scenarios. And
Well,
this is a
that's not
problem.
necessarily exclusive to server side testing though. Like compounding effects and having like test interactions. That's something you need to account for.
So on the server side, if you're building stuff on the server side, you would always have some unit tests already built. These
Mm,
unit tests would be running to make sure that all of your scenarios are running okay, and that all of your functions and the code functions are running okay. So that would be something that gets ran before you deploy something into the deployment stack. On the client side, you wouldn't have that step. You could build in some Selenium tests and stuff to test through certain scenarios, but you wouldn't have unit tests that could potentially stop you from deploying something. So, say you run some unit tests and it goes red, then you can't deploy that feature. You have to wait for that to go green. So you have to fix a unit test or fix any potential defects before you can release it. So that's what I mean by there's a server side unit test, that if you're deploying code on the server side, that's something that needs to be accounted for. So it can take a lot longer to build tests on the server side than it does on the client side.
I think that's fair. I'd say that a lot of client side experiments sometimes escape the rigor that they should get or would have got if they'd been server side. And I think that's
Yeah,
because marketing
absolutely.
product teams have been a bit cheeky and just cracking on with stuff. Not a bad
Yeah.
thing either, by the way. It's good
Yeah.
as
And I've
well.
always found that to be, because there's always that fine line of like how much QA do you spend on an A B test, given that the fact that you've got other A B tests running at the same time? Are you going to check every single interaction with every single A B test before you deploy it? Or are you going to just say you have QA'd this A/B test, it looks good. Let's release it, monitor it. If there's an issue, we take it down very quickly, and then we look into it. It's one of those kind of areas that, to be honest, is I've never really got the gist. Every client will have a different bar that they're
Yeah.
okay with. Some clients go, absolutely not. We have to be we have to make sure that it app works 100% of the time, all that kind of stuff. And others are much more, hey, let's just try it, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
That
slow
brings up
walking.
another question in like potential differences between server side versus client side, like level of ease in managing if a test has an error or a bug that's discovered after it's live. How easy is it to rectify that? At least with a client side tool, like just log into the tool, hit the stop button, and it usually is turned off within one CDN refresh.
yeah.
I think that in terms of turning stuff off, it will be the same because you can typically, turn things off just as quickly in server side. In fact, a lot of the
It
tools
just it
I think
just
say
stops serving the variant.
stop serving the variant, as in for the like actual rectifying. Again, you're going to have to go back to a developer.
Well, yeah, like doing the actual debugging process. That's
Yeah.
same as and engine probably
Mm.
equivalent, roughly engineering
Yeah.
effort.
I think
But
the
yeah,
difference you're talking about there is whether you've built your own server-side A/B testing tool that might be quite clunky, or whether you've bought one off the shelf, which should be just as smooth as client-side, I think.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still good to point out that it's like, oh, there's here's something where there's not really actually a difference between the two.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
There's one thing that I think often gets overlooked when it comes to A/B testing tools is the dashboarding and the views of metrics. Because on that we do have the server side, which is the delivery, server side or client side, which is the delivery of the test.
Mhm, mhm.
Then you have the dashboarding, which is what the analysts and the product owners and whoever's in charge of the test would be monitoring to see, what the results are, get statistical significance, all of that kind of stuff. One of the mistakes I remember from past, and Ollie, you know this well as well, is that when it comes to picking a server-side testing solution, even an off-the-shelf one, and then just considering the how the test is going to be delivered and not necessarily, okay, what analytics are we going to get in terms of dashboards? How reliable
Yeah,
is it? Do we have stats? What metrics do we get? Are the analysts able to review that and glean with great confidence that, hey, these are the results. I can stake my reputation on it, whatever. So yeah, it's that side, like just to point out that these testing tools are not just the delivery mechanism of the code, but also a dashboarding element
The reporting
needed.
mechanism of the
yeah.
data that the test is
Yeah,
collecting.
yeah,
I think that's why I love tools that do both, and where they're architected in a way that you can use events, success events, measurement events ap- applied in either way. So you could potentially have a server-side experiment and your server-side system delivering the experiment, but then you might have JavaScript events that you could configure in your front end to measure success. And in some cases with single page applications, you might have to measure them with JavaScript anyway, right?
Yeah,
So you
you
might,
have your data layer event stack regardless,
yeah,
and then it's a matter of like wiring up the data layer
yeah,
to
yeah.
distribute that information
Or,
correctly.
or, and this could open another can of worms, is using your web analytics tool, sending assignment events from your server side or your client side tool and sending assignment events into your web analytics tool like GA or
Yep.
Adobe. Obviously, there are, well-known challenges with that, should we say?
You're always going to
Python
have a
log
discrepancy, like
plus plus. Yeah.
yeah, right. Like if you're looking at your test data in GA versus in your testing tool, it's unlikely that it's going to be 100%. pair.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
test tool reports 1,000 visitors are in the variation. Then you look in GA and it's like, oh, there were only 900. Like, what's the issue?
What's
Well,
the difference?
there's just drop off because the
Definitely.
testing tool is not expected to be a one-stop shop for like comprehensive data information.
But I guess this is where, like, and I think going back to, why would somebody want to pick a server side tool versus a client side tool? And I think the deciding factors are going to be much more organizational than anything else. Like,
I
do
agree. Yeah.
you have the developers who are going to be developing all of the tests? Is that something that that you as an organization can cope with?
Mhm.
Is that something that's already there, that the developers are going to be building the tests? The analysts know that they're going to be analyzing the tests after the fact. Because in terms of for us as independent consultants, we do spend some time in Google Analytics or whichever analytics tool, grabbing all of the secondary metrics and then doing all of the stats on that. But imagine you have a company that's running at a very, very stupendously high velocity. Um, to do that for every single test and because in the analytics tools, you don't get the stats. And if you don't get the stats, you need to have a great deal of discipline to say, hey, I'm seeing this difference. Before I can report on this difference, I need to see if it's statistically significant. Really short thing, a small point, but a major, major consequences. Then when you're faced with a dwindling analyst resource pool, is there too much friction in place for them to report accurately? So that's like an organizational perspective that I think is often overlooked when it comes to making a decision. Is kind of like, hey, what state is your organization in, and how many analysts do you have? Are your analysts ready to be analyzing in this sort of way?
I don't think this is it's a super critical decision. I think that it's good to have like a trajectory to work towards having both. Personally, I think it's part of the maturity of experimentation to be able to enable lots of developers to deliver experiments. It's part of the cultural growth. So I think it's a great place to start with client side. I think it's a good place to be where you have both capabilities.
Yep.
And
Is there a
I've seen,
concern there of like if your end goal is using server side and associated complexities and
yeah,
uh, but benefits that you get off of that, is there a danger of like, oh, to get stuff up and running fast we're going to use client side, but then it becomes like your processes become entrenched with using the client side tool, so it becomes like it
yeah,
actually becomes more burdensome to shift, and so now you're
I don't,
stuck.
I don't, I don't necessarily think pure server side is necessarily like the final destination for everybody. I think I know there
No,
are, yeah, I think there are a few tech companies out there who have adopted it purely, but they're really quick at building stuff. Right? It's just a completely different environment to most companies.
there's also a
Well,
scale. Do you think there's a scale issue there too? Like,
yeah, I
do
think
you
if you're
need do you need a lot of do you
a lot
need
of
a lot
traffic,
more traffic to do server side
yeah,
testing?
probably, yeah, you need a lot of traffic to be running the volume of tests to have the developers to, it's a cyclical thing. But I think if
And
you're
no, I'm not looking for like a hard number or anything, but can we quantify a lot?
more than a million a day, more
Yeah.
than a million visits a
There
day,
you
I'd
go.
say.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
having said that,
So
though,
that's a
I'd
complete stab
say
in the dark. I made that up.
Having said that, though, I think there is this kind of this is what I mean by there's an organizational thing. Say I've got my own website, I built the website myself, and I look after it myself, all that kind of stuff. Now, imagine if I had like 100 users per day. If it was like 1,000, yeah, perfect. I could, for me, client side testing probably wouldn't be worth it at that stage. It's just me. I'm just doing everything. I'd
But you're
probably go
talking like that's
server
even
side.
just like a pre-testing stage. Like that's not enough
Yeah,
Well,
like test
even
for
beyond the
hard.
pre-testing stage, right? Because I've often spoken to some clients, kind of going, "Well, you've got a very small team. Your developers are basically just sitting on standby, not doing much anyway. You might as well just get a server-side testing tool, and then train up that very small team to be much more experiment-driven, as especially when you've got the CTO, CEO, or whoever really keen on going the scientific route, going the
yeah.
A/B testing route. So in
That's
that
that's
sort of scenario, I think yeah, great. You don't need to be ramping up test velocity to go server side. There's certain scenarios where the organization is at the right point to say,
yeah.
and your tech stack is at a good state to say, hey, you know what? It's going to be so much cheaper for you to go server side, and you're going to reap a lot of benefits from that.
Speaking of like saying something's cheaper versus more expensive, like strictly from like a tool cost standpoint, is there a financial consideration there? Like based on my experience, like with client side tools can vary pretty widely in price. You can find one as cheap as $100 a month, or an enterprise level that's like 10K a month or 20K a month or whatever. So there is some variability there, but like in general, like are there server side solutions out there that are inexpensive, or are the server side
Then
offerings generally more on the pricey
Their
side?
their server side solutions are free, depending on your tech stack.
So there's not so there so both run the gamut in
Yeah,
terms of like tool pricing.
yeah,
definitely. I think, Barry, you're onto something there with kind of almost like startups. You could go directly to server side. If
yeah.
you're like, you've got inkling to go down the scientific route, like you say, you could almost probably classify companies into buckets. Like you've got your big corporate legacy banking, finance. You're probably going to want to go client side, keep it simple, and then maybe start dabbling with server side and maybe have both for a bit. Whereas a tech company, maybe again, you might be more like a startup. You might want to go directly to server side or maybe have hybrid and do both for a while as well.
I
So,
also wonder if like where the sort of initiator comes from as well. Like if doing experimentation is more of a directive from the tech team, they'd
yeah,
probably be more likely to do server side. Whereas like if it's a directive coming say from like marketing or something
marketing,
like
yeah,
that, they're probably more
product.
inclined to go inclined to go client side.
And also, how interlinked are those teams? If it's a really small organizations and they're all interlinked, then it's not so much of an issue. Whereas if they're siloed, then the client
Yeah.
side is often the best
Yeah.
just to get going.
Or you potentially even run into the danger of like engineering team is running tests with a server side tool and not communicating with the marketing team who wants to run tests so they get a client side tool set up, because the engineering team's like paying the marketing team lip service of like, here, we'll give them that so they can test headlines and little things like that. Well, we're testing the actual important stuff with our own tests, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is one other thing you got me thinking about a minute ago, which was around the differences between, say, an experimentation tool and your web analytics tool, in that there's maybe a benefit around cookies and the way that they're delivered. So a server-side tool is able to deliver cookies or from the server. So that may mean that they're more accurate. And typically, at least when I've implemented web analytics tools, I use server-side cookies, and maybe the experimentation tool is using client-side cookies. And that's where you tend to see a difference in those numbers. So I think there's potentially another benefit of server-side by being slightly more accurate and not setting as easily deletable cookies. Even with client side now, there's ways around that. So Google Tag Manager server side, rooted with a DNS entry, getting really technical now, but being able to
Yeah.
do that and
Some
setting
of the
your
testing tools offer like CNAME solutions, or they
yeah,
can
yeah,
provide you with like PHP scripts and various other methods of like, here's how you can
setting
like set
these-
our cookie from your server.
yeah, definitely worth considering how you do
Oh,
that.
that's a whole other can of worms though. They're
Yeah, it
like
is.
the
Yeah,
cookie arms race for different browsers and things like
yeah.
that.
It is. It's another subject, isn't it, to talk about?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
a big.
We managed to get through this entire chat without once talking about single page applications versus regular multi-page
They
applications.
were someone mentioned SPAs early on, but
You might not have any choice but to go server side. How the
that's definitely where, like, if you're using an SPA, server side is favorable from an engineering standpoint because you got to do way more work to make a client side test function on an SPA.
especially when it's been built really badly, or when SPAs have been built really badly. They're an absolute pain to
Sound
be
like you're
maintaining.
speaking from personal
But not from personal experience at all. No.
Not at all. Not even in the slightest. It's just off the top of my head.
Well, very good. Anything else come to mind in regards to client side versus server side? I know
I
we've
think,
kind of like thrown out various tool names here and there
yeah,
and stuff. I mean, we could do a rundown. A lot of tools offer both
yeah.
now as well. Client side ones that I'm more commonly familiar with are Convert, VWO, Optimizely, Chameleon. What else? I think
Convert.com.
yeah,
I think you
yeah.
mentioned that.
I
Yeah.
mentioned Convert. Yeah, that's my primary choice when I'm
Yeah.
recommending
Gotta
vendors. Yeah.
gotta mention. I think my favorites because they do both. And again,
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna say, okay, so those
yeah.
are the ones that are client side, and then here's ones that are server side, and there's many of them that offer both.
Yeah.
So the primary server side ones, the ones that I'm most familiar with just by name, because Iqbal, you mention them all the time, is site specs.
Hmm.
Are there any other ones that are like more strong? I think maybe the the Adobe offering is more server side. I'm not
Mm,
familiar with that one though.
Adobe's both.
It's a hybrid.
Adobe targets both. It's hybrid. I'd say SiteSpect gets a special nomination because it's neither. It's a reverse proxy, so it can inject JavaScript as well. But definitely my favorite, historically my favorite, it's probably still my favorite, SiteSpect. Optimizely, especially their new releases over the last 6 months or so, they've separated out feature flags and experiments in the server side offering so that you can create a feature flag, or a technical team can create a feature flag. And at any point, you can then bring that feature flag into an experiment and then recreate that experiment and reconfigure it and run it under different combinations, which is really, really powerful. It's how it should have always been. But yeah, some really good modifications to Optimizely on that one. And yeah, convert.com is probably most recently my
They just
favorite.
started offering like a full stack
Yeah,
solution,
I
but
was
it's
going to say,
still I think it's still in its infancy though.
yeah, I was going to say from a client side perspective, recently that's been my favorite. I just love the reporting functionalities that you get in there out of the box. But yeah, I'm excited to have a go with their server side stuff as well.
I am
My pick
too.
for tools would be looking at your tech stack and finding out whether or not there is a tool available to do that. Like for instance, React has an A/B testing plugin module available, etc., etc. And then potentially, if the dashboarding isn't perfect, then figuring out what to do with the dashboarding angle.
That
But
is
yeah,
not the best answer yet. I mean, that is it's so common, especially in larger companies. The instant gut reaction is, oh, let's go to market. Instead
yeah,
of going, like, what do we actually have? What do we need?
yeah,
And do we have it? And, it just ends up with tool bloat
yeah.
in so many instances.
Like I was talking about earlier, where there's two different teams using two different testing tools on the same site.
Yeah, yeah. Classic.
Yeah, yeah. And apologies to any test tool vendor who may be listening to this that we didn't mention. None of the ones that we talked about, no paid promotions or
We're
anything.
not sponsored.
All of these are like personal opinions based on
Yeah.
experience.
We love all of them. We love all of them.
Yeah, especially the ones we've never used yet.
Yes.
Especially those ones.
All right, very good. As always, if anyone listening has questions, feedback, or if you disagree with something we said, you can always talk to any of us face to face at Zero Roundtable every Friday at conversionworld.co. If you're shy or you don't like speaking, you can connect with us on LinkedIn instead. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.